Welcome back. One final point before we go tonight. Everything you need to know about the Manafort indictment. The whole thing is confusing. Both sides are trying to spin it to fit their particular narrative. Democrats are trying to say, I told you so, there was Russian collusion. And Republicans are trying to say, nothing to see here, trying to make everything seem innocent. Well, here are the facts, and here's what you need to know to understand the whole thing. First of all, neither of those claims from either side, Republican or Democrat, neither is true. The most important thing is none of these charges against Paul Manafort have anything to do with the 2016 election, or Russian interference, or any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. None of them. Even the mainstream media, who have been stirring an empty pot for the past year, trying to cook up collusion between Trump and the Russians, are admitting today that these charges against Manafort have nothing to do with the election. Okay, so what actually happened here then? What happened is former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort was indicted this morning by Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller on 12 charges. These charges include conspiracy against the United States, conspiracy to launder money, failure to register as an agent of a foreign principal, false and misleading FARA statements. FARA, by the way, is the Foreign Agent Registration Act. Another count of false statements, and 7 counts of failure to file reports of foreign banks and financial accounts. So the important thing you need to know about the charges is the conspiracy against the U.S. is not related to Russian collusion. That charge means Manafort's work on behalf of a foreign government that he did not disclose to the U.S. government. And then he lied about it. It's similar to obstruction of justice. It's not a treason charge, though. So those are the charges in a nutshell. And they are serious charges, and Manafort deserves to be indicted for them, but they are not new. These are financial crimes reaching as far back as the early 2000s. The only part that happened during Trump's campaign, as far as we know right now, is Manafort lied to federal investigators during that time. The rest of the crimes were committed years ago, and the FBI was aware of Manafort's sketchy behavior, likewise, years ago. Of course, President Trump, when he was candidate, Trump should have vetted Manafort better, but to Trump's credit, he did fire Manafort when he found out about Manafort's ties to the pro-Russian Ukrainian president and all Manafort's dirty money tied up in this mess. It's also worth noting when Manafort emailed the Trump campaign and offered his services as campaign manager for free, reports say it was Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and Tom Barrack who pushed Trump to accept the offer. More on that later, probably. Meanwhile, another Trump campaign advisor named George Papadopoulos pled guilty today to making false statements to the FBI related to his connection to Russia. This one is actually more serious than Manafort's indictments as it relates to the Trump administration, but I'm still not sure this is a smoking gun of any sort. This guy, Papadopoulos, reportedly offered, while in a meeting with Trump campaign officials, to facilitate a meeting between Trump and Putin. He claimed he had connections that could make that happen. It never happened. Reportedly, the Trump campaign responded with caution and skepticism, another credit to them. This may be a case of attempted collusion between the Russians and Papadopoulos, but it doesn't sound like any collusion between the Trump campaign itself and the Russians. Stay tuned as we find out more about this. Finally, and this is probably a large enough issue that we'll be digging into this later in the week, why does Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller have the sweeping and seemingly unlimited power to indict people on charges that have nothing to do with Russian interference in our election? Clearly, Manafort is sketchy. All indications point to the fact that he probably committed these crimes, even though he pled not guilty in court today. But Mueller himself was appointed to investigate Russia's influence in the 2016 election, not to find crimes his FBI failed to bring to charges from years ago. This scares me. A man appointed because of politics. Remember, Mueller was appointed after former FBI Director James Comey was fired by Trump, and Comey leaked notes on his meeting with Trump to the press. Deputy Attorney General at the time, Rod Rosenstein, appointed Robert Mueller after Comey leaked those notes, so the whole thing was political to begin with. And it's very troubling to me how much unlimited power Mueller has, since none of these charges have anything to do with Russian interference in our election. And then the bonus piece of information, we'll be covering this tomorrow. Tony Podesta, brother of John Podesta. John Podesta, as you remember, was Hillary Clinton's campaign chair. Tony Podesta quit his position at the Podesta Group today. Now, this is important because of the possible ties between the Podesta Group and Paul Manafort. We discussed this briefly last week. Paul Manafort had ties to Russian money, clearly. Manafort was also reportedly tied to John Podesta and the Podesta Group, who, of course, were tied to Hillary Clinton, who at the time was Secretary of State, right at the time when Hillary's State Department approved the sale of 20% of U.S. uranium supply to a Russian nuclear company. Much more on that tomorrow, but for now, that's what you need to know, and that is my final point. You can reach me on Twitter at Liz_Wheeler. If you liked the show, please send me an email at oann.com/contact. In the meantime, catch us here tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern. And until then, have a good night.
Rosenstein and Mueller should step aside, and the Inspector General at least until it can be decided on a special counsel. Have them step aside where the investigation is carried out. We also have another Inspector General, just as an aside, investigating.
Yeah.
And that's Andrew McCabe, the number 2 man at the FBI, who I do not understand how he can be involved in the administration of the agency that now its top officials are so suspect, and the American people cannot have any faith or trust.
Yeah.
The president certainly can't have any confidence in these people. Why in the heck don't they move out?
Right. 3 things.
Of the agency until it can be resolved.
Yeah, Lou, I would say 3 things need to happen. One, there needs to be a limit. Congressman DeSantis has a bill that would limit the amount of time that Special Counsel Mueller can do this investigation. So it doesn't just go on forever and ever. Second, there should be a special counsel. We sent a letter from the Judiciary Committee 3 months ago asking for a special counsel to look into Secretary Clinton, Mr. Comey, Fusion GPS, Clinton Foundation, all these issues. And then I think third, Congress, and this is going to happen because it was announced last week from the respective chairman, Congress should look into these issues. So we should have investigations into these issues. Clinton, Comey, Lynch, Fusion GPS, dossier, all these things. We should look into all these issues as well. Those 3 things are what needs to happen so the American people can get the truth.
I have to say that Speaker Ryan, Leader McConnell, these are intentional poison pills that they are putting into these bills. Don't you think? I mean, they're not, these are lots of things, but these people have a clear understanding of the consequences of their actions, don't you think?
I just don't want to get myself to believe that either of the leaders of the House or the Senate are actively trying to sabotage not just this president, but their own party, and more importantly, sabotage the American people and jobs. Lou, that would be tantamount to a level of not quite treason, but political treason, not constitutional treason. And that's tragic. Let's just pray to God that they're not consciously just slow-walking these tax issues like they did Obamacare, and that we don't have a bunch of people who dislike this president.
We've seen them do it with Obamacare. We're watching it with tax reform, which is supposed to be so easy. Remember? All of the wags were suggesting they should have led with tax reform because that'd be so easy. Well, that's put the lie to those who thought so, well, conventionally and adventurously. There seems to be nothing easy on Capitol Hill these days. Governor, great to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lou.
I dedicate my final thoughts to the biggest snowflake of them all. That would be Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, of course. So Senator Flake decided to take the floor of the Senate this week to remind us all why the swamp needs to be drained, and quickly. I think the purpose of the speech was to inform us he's a quitter, but a self-righteous one. The left loved the speech, which pretty much tells you everything you need to know about Senator Jeff Flake. Hey, bud, you want to get out of the rat race? That's just fine. In fact, thank you. But don't blame Donald Trump and don't insulate your unpopularity, lackluster performance, and overall policy failures in some kind of a morality bubble wrap, because we aren't buying it. Senator, with all due respect, no one took the wind out of your sails. You did that. Way back when in the House of Representatives, you were a true conservative, and for that, we thank you. Then what the heck happened? Oh yeah, same thing that happened to Mitch McConnell, John McCain, and a host of other barely conservatives. You wanted to be more popular and sit with the cool kids that get zero done. Over 6 years, you slowly but surely pushed away your base, your donors, and now Trump supporters. Bad move. Really bad move. So flash forward to this week's pearl-clutching speech where you remind us we must fight for our country, our children, and what's right. And then you quit. You quit because if you didn't, we'd do it for you. Senator Flake, you are America's ex-boyfriend. You knew you were going to get dumped, so you dumped us first. Well, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And same goes for the rest of these never Trump, anti-Trump, destroy Trump rhinos. Don't get it twisted. It wasn't the do-nothing, business-as-usual, get-nothing-done GOP establishment that won a year ago on November 8th, 2016. It was Donald Trump and the America First promise, a promise we elected you to fight for. This is downright embarrassing. For decades, you failed to give us balanced budgets, tax, healthcare, and immigration reform. But now you blame your failures on Donald Trump? I'm so sick of hearing this belly aching about the president's tone or tweets or temperament. Newsflash, the average American doesn't have the money, time, or luxury to sob in the corner over President Trump's tone. We didn't elect him to be our national yoga instructor. We elected him to cut the BS and get things done.